What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be discussing the purchase contract. I think I put out many videos about buying Connecticut, what to do before you want to buy, what to do when you go under contract, when you are under contract, what you shouldn't do. So I think the final thing is showing you guys the purchase contract, and that will kind of, in a sense, conclude the buying series I've been doing, because essentially when you go under contract, you are signing this contract. And I'm not sure how many other agents do it, but how I do it is before we even go under contract, really at our first meeting at the buyer's consultation, in a sense, I go over the purchase contract, because it is a lot to take in when you have to put in an offer, right? They might say highest and best, so you already know there's competition. And you have to look through this 4-page paper with about, I think there's 23 paragraphs on it that outline X, Y, and Z. And in my buyer's consultation, I like to just go over it briefly, in a sense. Like, basically how I'm going to do this video is how I do it in my buyer's consultation. So you have an idea of, the power you hold, and like how you can get your deposit back, your inspection, just everything that pertains to you and that can affect you. So that's what we are talking about today. So before we get started, my name is Deja Spearman. I'm a Connecticut Realtor. And if you have any questions regarding buying, selling, investing, or renting, I'll be more than happy to help. I'll put my best contact on the screen, which is my phone and email. And yeah, feel free to reach out to me, whether it's through those contacts or on social media. I would love to help you any way I can. So let's get started. Let me share my screen. All right, so here is the purchase contract I use. Greater Hartford Associations of Realtors, that is the association I'm a part of. There's other purchase contracts out there. This is just the one I use, and there's also like the Smart MLS. I think that's what it's called, but I'm not positive. But there's another one that I also use, but today we are going to be using this one. So let's get started. Parties, you the buyer. Let's say John Smith, and your current address wherever you're living. So the buyer's name and address, and then the seller's name and address. And it could be the property they're purchasing, or it could be somewhere else. That is 1. 2 is the property in which you're purchasing. Pretty simple. Yeah. 3 is fixtures and personal property. So with that, before we go under contract, they have usually an inclusion and exclusions list, and it tells you what they are including with the sale. That's personal property. Personal property is something like, say you take the house and you flip it upside down and stuff falls out. That's typically personal property. Some examples are, could be a refrigerator, could be a couch, a desk, a standalone lamp, stuff like that. That's personal property, stuff that is not basically attached to the house. Fixtures is stuff that is attached to the house. So pipes, your furnace, so that gas. They're obviously not taking the roof, but stuff that is literally physically attached that has to be with the house. So that is fixtures and personal property. Like I said, they include inclusions and exclusions rider list. And basically I click this off and I put what's included and what's excluded. So that is that. So 4 is the price in which you are buying the house. So say you want to offer $250,000 for a house that's $255,000. We're going to put that right there. And also in this whole area, we're going to put your deposit, and I'll go over that in a second. We're going to put your down payment, and you're going to put down how much of a mortgage you will need to take out from the bank after your deposit and your down payment. So your deposit, that is basically what you give to show that you're ready and willing to buy this house, and while you also do your due diligence. So your due diligence is the inspection, the appraisal, and also market contingency. I'll talk about that more in depth later on in the contract. But your deposit, you're going to hand it to them. You hand it to them or mail it within 3 days of this fully executed contract. This contract is fully executed when both parties sign, the buyer and seller. So you have 3 days to hand that to the seller and or overnight it, mail it. So if they do not receive the deposit, and I'm sorry, I think I said that the seller receives it. That's actually not true. It's either going to be the attorney or sometimes the listing brokerage holds it. But if either parties do not receive it within 3 days, the seller has the right to terminate the contract, because it says right here, the seller has the right to terminate this contract because you did not get your deposit in on time within those 3 days. So I'm also doing a separate video on just the real estate deposit because you can easily lose like 5, 10, 20, 50, 70, $100,000 for not following these rules in the contract. And that's also why I'm doing this video. So that is that. The deposit is also part of your down payment. So say in total you want to have an $80,000 down payment, you take $20,000 of that $80,000 down payment, and that could be your deposit. And all those numbers, both deposit, down payment, and all those numbers need to equal up to the 250. 5 is your mortgage contingency. So if you're a cash transaction, you don't have a mortgage contingency, you could waive your mortgage contingency, or you're going to have a mortgage contingency. Those three, it's all obviously up to you. I personally would never waive your mortgage contingency because you never know what can happen within that 30 days that they're underwriting the loan. You can lose your job, a new payment, debt. I mean, you just really never know. It's, like I said, up to you, but we usually check off these things, some mortgage contingency. And with that, I'm going to talk to the lender, right? And I'm going to say, when do you feel most comfortable closing? How many days do you need to underwrite this loan and be confident that you can get it? So let's say he says 30 days. All right. So April 16th, that's a Sunday. So April 17th, 30 days from now, I'm personally going to add 1 to about 3 days onto that just for safekeeping. Because if he's like 30 days or less, I'm still going to add at least a couple days. If he says, in between 30 and 45, I would probably add 5 to 7 days. It really depends on the lender. But he provides that. And also the rest of this is whatever your pre-approval says, I'm putting it right here. So your loan amount, before I said 170, your interest rate could be iffy, usually Prev. That's usually what we put unless you actually have a locked-in rate. And then your term, 30 years, 15 years, who knows? And then the type of loan you're getting. So that is mortgage contingency. And then right here, you're going to talk about the buyer. Does the buyer need to sell their house in order to get this one? Or are they just buying it with the funds that they have? And we'll also talk about that later. But that just means it's called the Hubbard clause, which means in order to buy this house, you need to sell your current house. And that's how you're going to have the funds to buy this house. So usually, unless you are under the Hubbard clause, you're going to check off this one. Over here, you're going to be talking about mortgage commitment and contingency. That's really what it is. And also my duty as a realtor on making sure that I'm checking in with the lender. So I'm going to pause right here so you guys can read it. But that's basically what it's saying about the mortgage contingency and, the realtor. So, and also what happens if you don't get mortgage contingency. All right, feel free to pause the screen. We're going to move on. So 6, deposit and escrow. So when you mail your deposit and or hand in your deposit, it's going to be kept in an escrow account. The account is literally there for it to be held until we either close or you back out of the contract. It's not to be spent or anything. It's literally an account for your check. That's it. 7 is closing. So usually the closing will be at a minimum of 3 days after the mortgage contingency. So we're required to give lenders 3 days after mortgage contingency for like clear to close and stuff like that. So that is that. And remember, we also have the title, which we're talking about later on. So between mortgage contingency and the title, which usually the title will be done before mortgage contingency, but you never know. Some lenders I know close in literally 7 days, can clear to close in 7 to 10 days. So closing, I usually put a week after the mortgage contingency. Possession at closing. So that just means that the way you saw the property last, which will most likely be the inspection, that's how the condition of the property should be. There shouldn't be any holes in the walls, any scuffs on the floor, stuff like that. And if there is, then we can discuss with the sellers about a credit and stuff like that. And also everything that's on the inclusion list that's supposed to be provided with the property. When you buy it, it's supposed to be there. And if it isn't, then we have to figure out a way to either get it back or once again a credit. But if it's supposed to be included in the property, it should be there. We're going to make sure of this at the final walkthrough. And also in this paragraph, they are discussing that the sellers do not have to hire a cleaning service to clean the house before you close. So like I said, whatever condition you saw it in at the inspection, that's how it should be. Shouldn't be any dirtier. It could be cleaner, but it shouldn't be any dirtier, and everything should be the same. So other conditions. So here you can put, that the inspection could be for informational purposes only. You can put that, buyer will cover the appraisal gap if there is one. So those are some things that you could put in other conditions. Title. So the title, we are an attorney state. The title will be done by an attorney. You want that title to be clean, and we actually won't close until it's clean. There could be liens on it, and we want it to be clean. You can buy the house, and someone could come after you being like, oh, you owe me this or you that, but your name is on the title. So we want the title to be fresh and clean for when you move into the property. Anything that you do on the property, it's for you. Now, we don't want the sellers old problems or anything to come back and bite you in the butt. So that has to be clean before we close. And once again, it'll be done by an attorney that you choose, and or the attorney that I also work with, I can also recommend. Adjustments. So depending on the time of the year that we close, you will be paying your shared portion of the taxes, the water bill. If there's oil left in the tank, you can be paying for that as well. So it's all basically based on, even if you have an HOA fee, you get that portion of it, depending on the time we close, you can be paying for that. And the attorney will be doing that and give you the list of the adjustments as well. So 12 is liquidated damages. So during this contract, you have 3 ways to get out of it: during the inspection, during the appraisal, and during mortgage contingency. So let's go with the inspection. Let's talk about that. You have 5 days after the inspection to negotiate with the sellers. That's usually typical. It could be longer, but that's usually typical. Say on day 5, or no, let's say on day 7, you're just like, you know what, I want to back out of the contract. Well, the sellers have the right to keep your deposit because they gave you a 5-day grace period to negotiate with the inspection, and you did not do that. You were outside of that contingency, so they have the right to keep your deposit. And it's the same thing with sellers as well. Say during the inspection, the seller's like, oh, you know what? We're going to cancel the contract. Something came up, yada, yada, yada. And it's the same thing with sellers. Sellers, just like you have 3 times throughout the contract to get out of it, so do the sellers. And if the sellers say on day 8 are just like, you know what, we're going to back out of the contract or X, Y, and Z, you can actually go after them because you're going to get your deposit back. But say you paid for the inspection, that was $550. You can not sue, but it is a legal matter if that doesn't involve realtors. You can go after the seller and be like, hey, I want you to give me back my $550 because I paid for it. I did an inspection and you backed out after the contingency. So that is basically liquidated damages. 13, complete agreement. So that just means that when both parties sign an initial on each page and at the end, this contract is complete and everybody's in agreement. Assignability. So say I go under contract, I went through the inspection, and I'm just like, you know what, there's too much to be done. I don't want to deal with it. But say my sister comes over and she's like, well, I'll deal with it. I would love to go under contract with this house. It is a written consent between both parties, which is the buyers and sellers, but you can assign this contract over to your sister as long as both parties agree, and it's in writing. So there we go. That's assignability. Survival. If any of the parties in this contract dies, the contract will continue. I know it's a little dark, I know. But if your realtor dies, the buyers die, the sellers die, the listing agent dies, it will still continue regardless. Equal housing rights. So you, the buyer, are allowed to look at any house in the state of Connecticut within your pre-approval. Plain and simple. No one can tell you otherwise. If you're approved for $500,000. And say some realtor, I've heard some realtors is like, well, I don't want to show you X, Y, and Z, or I don't think that's a good neighborhood for you. That is one, not right, and two, that is equal housing rights. You have the right to do that because you're pre-approved for that amount. So no one can tell you otherwise. As long as you're pre-approved for that amount, you can look at any house in the state of Connecticut. 17, just like I said, the meat of the contract is the mortgage agency. So is home inspection. Very well, it's important, but I'll get into it. So you, the buyer, have the opportunity to do a complete home inspection by a licensed Connecticut home inspector. And he will look at 5 things: structural, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, and safety. So those 5 things are the main things he focuses on in the inspection. You can waive your inspection if you want. That's ultimately your right. And you can elect it. So you're going to click that. You're going to click home inspection. And everything I just said right there regarding the home inspection is right there. You also have the opportunity to do a termite and wood destroying insect inspection. It is an additional cost on top of the original home inspection. But you do have the right to do that if you want to see if there's any termites or wood destroying insect bug in your home. And so another, inspection test, asbestos, radon, and mold. You can usually see molds. I actually saw a house the other day that had black mold underneath the sink. Asbestos, they actually used that back in the day for insulation purposes. Not too many people know about radon. I know it wasn't until I got into real estate I didn't know that much about radon. It's an odorless, colorless, radioactive gas that comes from the earth. And if you have like any holes or anything, it could seep into your house and cause lung cancer. So once again, this is an additional cost on top of the home inspection, but it's usually found in basements, and the inspector puts like a little test in the basement. It comes back, I think, 48 or 72 hours later, and the test will tell you then, is there a high thing of radon? If there's no radon, stuff like that. So you are entitled to do all those tests. They also have additional tests like septic, lead. Oh, the lead is actually later in this contract. Water, you can test the water. There's actually many additional tests. Some of them do pools. So there's many tests that you can do that is an additional cost on top of just the regular home inspection. I would say usually I think it's in between $450 and $650, give or take. So right here, very important. So remember I was talking about the deposit and a way you can lose it. Here's one of them. So you have, usually the typical is 5 calendar days to negotiate with the sellers or I guess think about what you want to do regarding the information you received from the inspection. So there's 3 ways you can go about it. You can back out of the contract and get your deposit back, and it does state that in this paragraph. You can request the sellers to fix some certain things. Like say I'm like, hey, can you fix this? Say you get on a list of like 6 things, they want to fix 3. You could do that. You can request them to fix a couple things, or you can just do nothing and be like, there isn't too much that needs to be done. We can do it ourselves. We can just continue on. So those are 3 things you can do. And yeah, so you have 5 days after the inspection is performed to get all that done. Make that decision. Do you want to back out? Do you want to request for things to be done, or are you just satisfied with your inspection and you don't want anything done? You can do whatever is found. So that is what this whole paragraph is stating. And once again, if you do it outside of those 5 calendar days, they say on day 4, you're like, we're going to continue on with the contract. You're second guessing yourself. Day 7, you're like, I don't want to do it. You can lose your deposit. So 5 calendar days, not business, calendar. 17. So in homes built before 1978, there was some lead in the paint, and you do have, once again, the opportunity to have an inspector for an additional cost test the paint in your house to make sure there's no lead in it. Now, granted, in homes during 1978, there are honestly tests at Home Depot that you can do, and my thing is probably, if you were painting your house in 1978, I'm assuming there's probably about 10 coats of paint that's under it. So, but it is your right to do so. And if you do not want to do it, we are going to waive it. The initial, there we go. Riders, so I actually have one up here. Oh, sorry. So here are the riders, and we're going to talk about, let's say, the as-is rider. So some homes, if the sellers do not want to fix anything or say they're older and they don't have the money or just certain things, it really depends on the seller, but if they want to sell their property as is, we are going to sign this rider, and that's exactly what it states. The seller does not have the intention to correct or pay or credit the buyer in any way for whatever conditions that are described in the inspection report or anything. Now, I have had my buyer sign this for another house, and I have seen sellers being like, hey, well, we can fix a couple things to save the sale. It depends on the seller, but when you do go under contract with a house like this, go in the mindset that's like they're not wanting to fix anything, and or let's say willing, to be honest, but you never know. And so that's paragraph 1. And paragraph 2 basically states that even though the home is as is, if you do an inspection, you have the opportunity to back out of the contract if whatever was found in the inspection report wasn't like satisfactory or there's too much to do. You do have that right. So just because it's sold as is doesn't mean you can still back out because the inspection was not good. So that is the as is rider. So, and then what's another rider we can do? So the Hubbard clause and then under contract clause, similar but different. So especially as we go into spring market and it's getting a little bit more competitive, the under contract clause might be a little bit more attractive. Why is that? The Hubbard clause, if you remember earlier when I was talking about the mortgage contingency, the Hubbard clause means you need to sell your house to buy this house that you want. Under contract clause means your house is already currently under contract, so you're a little bit farther along in the process than someone who has a Hubbard clause, who needs to still get under contract. With the under contract one, you are already under contract. So say you did your inspections and the appraisal, maybe you have like maybe 2 to 3 weeks left, mortgage contingency. That might be a little bit more attractive and a little bit more competitive than someone who's just like, well, I still have to go through all those stages. And well, actually, you still have to find a buyer and go through all those stages. So those are the difference between those two. And you never know. It doesn't matter. But just going to the spring market and how competitive I've already seen it, I do think under contract will be a little bit more competitive and a little bit more attractive. So that is a couple riders and, common interest community that goes with condos, all that. But honestly, unless you're in these types of situations, you don't really need extra riders, to be honest. Like I said, unless you need those type of situations. 19. So before we go into contract, we're going to look at the property condition report. The property condition report tells you about the condition of the property, the roof life, how long the seller should have lived there, the type of heat, is there any water damage, is the foundation good, are you aware of any of this stuff? Most of the time, they are not aware. Sometimes they could be aware. I went through a house when we actually went under contract, and they knew that there was asbestos on the pipes in the basement, stuff like that. But this is what they will put in the property condition report. If they do not provide a property condition report, they owe you $500 credit at closing. Same with smoke and carbon monoxide detectors. So the sellers, I've seen, honestly, in more situations, they rather give you the $250 at closing, but the house has to have carbon monoxide and smoke detectors, and they need to be working. The seller will provide an affidavit saying that if he does not do that, he has to give you $250 at closing, and with that, you can just double check, get new smoke detectors, carbon monoxide detectors if you want. So that is 19. You can get an extra $750 if they did not provide the property condition report or the smoke and carbon monoxide affidavit. 20. This is basically a list of hazardous waste sites. So if you live close enough to a hazardous waste site, it is your right to basically find out more information and see how it affects you through the Department of Energy and Environmental Protection. And so that also goes with A, but B, C, and D. So B, basically, if there's a gun range near your house, you have the right to go over to the gun range and figure out in what direction they're shooting in. So say, I don't know if you can see the picture, but say your house is here and they're shooting this way, you would want to know. Or say the gun range is here and they're shooting that way, but your house is here. Obviously, you want it shooting not near our house, but that you have the right to do that and conduct like an investigation to see like, what's happening, yada yada. Procedures tells you that if there's any environmental matters on the property, you have the right to know, and that information is available to you. So honestly, you can find out if you have all this land, if hunting can be done in like your woods, stuff like that. And then D is well water testing. You not only have the pamphlet, but you have the right to conduct a private testing and to see if your water for your home is good for you. So that is 20. 21. So that just means that electronic methods that you can sign this contract electronically, DocuSign, AuthentiSign, whatever. Because honestly, I mean, some buyers are not in the state, some buyers are not in this town, yada yada. You can sign it electronically, and it's more than fine. And so this final part right here, I haven't actually done fax at all since I became a realtor. So most of the time we'll do this by email. And 22, the broker minus eXp Realty. It'll be the other person, could be eXp Realty, Caldwell, you don't know. But either way, the brokerages that are basically representing the buyer and seller in this transaction. And then finally, the buyer's signature and the seller's signature. So that is the real estate purchase contract. I did speak a little fast, I realized, but feel free to watch this contract. Hopefully I wasn't scrolling too much to the point that you guys can like pause it if you need to, and you can stop and read it yourself. And if you want more clarity on it, if you want me to go more in depth, feel free to reach out to me. I can easily hop on a Zoom call and either do this again or give you more clarity. Reach out to me any way you can. I would love to help. But that is the purchase contract. That is the contract that you are submitting when you put in an offer and it gets accepted. And those are your rights. And once again, I'm putting out another video on your deposits because the appraisal actually wasn't in this contract, but there are some things regarding the deposit that you should know about regarding your appraisal. So, especially if you're doing a government-backed loan. So, I hope you guys got some value out of this contract. And if you did like the video, make sure you hit the like button and subscribe so you're notified when I post my next video. I thank you for watching, and I hope you have a great day and go get prepared for spring market.